13 miles up, there is an American aircraft flying right now where the sky turns black and you can see the curve of the Earth. And it is balanced on a knife edge. At that altitude, the difference between flying too slow and flying too fast, between the wings stalling and the airframe tearing itself apart, can be as little as 6 knots. 6. Slow down a fraction, it stalls and falls. Speed up a fraction, it shakes itself to pieces. Pilots call that razor-thin band the coffin corner. And U-2 pilots don't pass through it. They live in it, holding the aircraft steady inside those 6 knots for 8 hours or more, wearing a spacesuit. This is the Dragon Lady, the most difficult aircraft in the world to fly.
Here's why those 6 knots exist, and it comes down to the air itself. At 70,000 feet, the air is roughly a 20th as dense as it is at sea level. 95% of the atmosphere is already below you, and thin air creates a trap. To generate enough lift in air that thin, the wing has to move fast. Go any slower, and the wing simply stops flying. It stalls and the aircraft starts falling. So there's a minimum speed you cannot go below. But at the same time, in thin air, the airflow over the wing reaches the speed of sound much sooner. Go a little too fast, and the air over the wing goes supersonic, the aircraft starts buffeting violently, the nose can pitch down, and the airframe can be torn apart. So there's a maximum speed you cannot exceed. Down at sea level, those two limits are hundreds of knots apart, an enormous, comfortable range. But as you climb, the minimum rises and the maximum falls. They squeeze toward each other.
And at the U-2's ceiling, they nearly touch, by some accounts as little as 5 or 6 knots between them. Think about what that means practically. That's a window narrower than the speed change from a gentle gust of wind. For hours, the pilot holds the aircraft inside that band by hand, with an autopilot that historically couldn't always be trusted. It is one of the most demanding, sustained flight regimes in all of aviation. Now the pilot. Because at 70,000 feet, the human body is the fragile part. Up there, the air pressure is so low that exposed blood and body fluids would begin to boil. Not from heat, from lack of pressure. Without protection, a pilot would lose consciousness in seconds and be dead shortly after. So U-2 pilots don't wear a flight suit. They wear a full pressure suit, essentially a spacesuit, costing well over $100,000, of the same family as what astronauts wear. Sealed helmet, gloves, the works. Inside a fighter cockpit at the edge of space. And putting it on isn't the hard part. Before every high flight, the pilot has to sit and breathe pure oxygen for a full hour before takeoff. Not for the oxygen, to wash the nitrogen out of their bloodstream. Because if that nitrogen stays in, then as the pressure drops on the climb, it can form bubbles in the blood, exactly like a scuba diver surfacing too fast. Decompression sickness, the bends. At 13 miles up, so an hour of your day is spent sitting still in a chair, breathing through a mask, purging your own blood before you've even walked out to the aircraft. And then there's eating. Missions run 8, 10, 12 hours. You can't open a sealed helmet. So food is a liquid paste squeezed through a tube that plugs into a port in the helmet. Dinner at 70,000 feet through a straw. Let's put those two limits on one picture because this is the whole story of flying this aircraft. The vertical axis is altitude. The horizontal axis is speed. Now draw two lines. First line is the stall speed, the slowest you can fly. As you climb into thinner air, that line moves to the right. You have to go faster and faster just to stay airborne. The second line is the critical Mach limit, the fastest you can fly before the airflow goes supersonic and the aircraft starts to break up. As you climb, that line moves to the left. The faster limit gets slower, two lines converging as you go up.
and the space between them is where flight is possible. Down low, that gap is enormous.
Climb higher and it narrows, and narrows, and narrows. At the very top, where the U2 works, the two lines almost meet. The gap closes to a sliver, as little as 5 or 6 knots wide. That sliver is the coffin corner. Too slow on one side, structural failure on the other, and nothing in between. Every other aircraft avoids this region. The U-2 was built to work inside it.
So how do you even build an aircraft that can fly up there? The answer is, you don't really build a jet. You build a glider and bolt an engine to it. Look at the wings. The U-2's wingspan is about 105 feet, roughly 31 meters, on a fuselage that's under 20 meters long. The wings are dramatically longer than the aircraft itself. That's not a fighter's wing. That's a sailplane's wing, scaled up. Long, slender wings are the only way to squeeze lift out of air that thin. And the airframe is built as light as physically possible to help, which brings a cost. Down low, in thick air, the U-2 is fragile, twitchy, and reluctant to descend. It floats. It's sensitive to gusts. It is not a rugged aircraft. There's a detail that captures the whole design.
Those enormous wings are too long to support their own weight on normal landing gear. So the U-2 rolls on a bicycle-style undercarriage, 2 wheels in a line down the middle, with small outrigger wheels called pogos propping up the wingtips for takeoff. As it lifts off, the pogos simply drop away and fall onto the runway. The aircraft leaves them behind. And on landing, the wings are so efficient that the aircraft doesn't want to come down. It just keeps flying, in ground effect, floating above the runway, which sets up one of the strangest procedures in aviation. Quick answer to why anyone built something this extreme. In the 1950s, the United States had almost no reliable idea what was happening inside the Soviet Union. How many bombers, how many missiles, where they were. There were no satellites yet, and any aircraft that flew over would be shot down. So the requirement was brutally simple. Fly higher than anything the Soviets could reach. Higher than their fighters could climb, higher than their missiles could hit. Everything strange about this aircraft, the glider wings, the fragility, the spacesuit, comes from that single demand: get above everyone else. On the 5th of July, 1956, a CIA pilot named Hervey Stockman flew the first U-2 mission over the Soviet Union. 8 hours alone, in radio silence, at 65,000 feet, looking down at an entire country nobody could see into. Here's the engineering trait at the heart of the aircraft, and every strange thing about the U-2 falls out of it. Start with the requirement: fly above 70,000 feet. Now the physics. At that height, there is almost no air, about 1/20th the density at sea level. Lift depends on air, so to generate enough lift with almost no air, you need one of two things: enormous speed or an enormous wing. Enormous speed is the other answer. That's the path the SR-71 took later, with heat and fuel costs to match. The U-2 took the other road, an enormous wing and the lightest possible structure. And once you choose that, everything else is forced. Long, slender wings mean glider-like behavior. It floats and won't descend. A featherweight structure means fragility down low. Almost no air means the pilot needs a pressure suit. And the thin air squeezing the flight envelope means the coffin corner. None of the U-2's quirks are design mistakes. They're all the price of one decision: to get above everybody else and stay there for hours. And now the part that sounds made up but isn't. The U-2 is so hard to land that the Air Force sends a car after it. A fast car, a performance sedan capable of about 140 miles an hour, driven by another qualified U-2 pilot who races down the runway behind the landing aircraft. Why? Because the pilot in the cockpit essentially cannot see what he needs to see. He's wearing a sealed pressure helmet that restricts his view, sitting behind a long nose on landing gear arranged like a bicycle, with no way to judge how far his wheels are from the ground. So the pilot in the chase car becomes his eyes. Racing along the runway, he calls out the height over the radio: 10 feet, 5 feet, 2 feet, counting the aircraft down to the ground. And here's the final twist. Because those enormous wings refuse to stop flying, the pilot can't simply set the aircraft down. He has to deliberately stall it, pull the nose up until the wing stops producing lift a couple of feet above the runway, and let it drop onto its wheels. Get it wrong, and it bounces back into the air, and now you're stalling for real, a few feet up. The hardest aircraft in the world to fly ends every mission with a deliberate stall, guided by a man in a muscle car.
Here's the thing that surprises people most. This aircraft, designed in the 1950s, is still flying. Satellites were supposed to make it obsolete decades ago. They didn't. Satellites follow predictable orbits. Anyone can calculate when one is overhead and simply cover things up. A U-2 can be launched on demand, sent where it's needed, loiter for hours, and be redirected in the air. And it can carry sensors far larger and more capable than anything you can economically put in orbit. So the retirement of the U-2 has been announced, delayed, announced again, and delayed again for decades. Every time someone declares it obsolete, another mission comes along that only it can do. Which means the whole strange package, the glider wings, the spacesuits, the hour of pure oxygen, the chase car, the 6-knot margin, is not a museum piece. It's an operational reality being performed by American pilots right now, today.
So, what is it actually like up there, in the coffin corner? It's silent. The sky above is black, even in daytime, because there's barely any atmosphere left to scatter light. Below you, the Earth curves away, and 95% of the air on this planet is beneath your wings. You're sealed in a spacesuit, sipping liquid food through a tube, hours from anywhere, in complete radio silence. And the entire time, you are holding a fragile, glider-winged aircraft inside a band of speed maybe 6 knots wide. Too slow, and the wing quits. Too fast, and the airframe comes apart. There is no wide margin, no room to relax, for 8 or 10 hours straight. That's what makes the U-2 remarkable. Not that it flies to the edge of space, rockets do that in minutes. It's that this aircraft goes up there and stays, balanced on a knife edge, held there by a human being, hour after hour. It doesn't reach the edge, it lives on it.